Hey there! As learning creators, we at GOALisB are bringing a series of lessons on preparing for the critical reasoning section of the GMAT. Welcome to this comprehensive video module on mastering assumption questions in the critical reasoning section of the GMAT exam. In this module, we will delve into the basics of critical reasoning and learn how to answer assumption questions effectively. Every week we will explore a simplified way of learning how to solve a question type for the GMAT Critical Reasoning section. Remember to like and share this video with someone who is preparing for the GMAT exam. Subscribe to this channel for more lessons on GMAT preparation and MBA application. As we explored in the previous section, an assumption is essentially the unspoken evidence that must be true for the argument's conclusion to be valid. It's vital to remember that when tackling assumption questions, you must accept the author's conclusion as unquestionably true, even if it seems implausible. Often, students struggle when they start questioning the logic or validity of the author's argument. However, for assumption questions, you must treat the author's conclusion as indisputable. Assumption is a fundamental concept in critical reasoning, as it forms the basis for several question types, including find the assumption, evaluate the argument, strengthen, weaken, and flaw questions. Let's explore what assumptions are and why they are crucial. An assumption is essentially the unstated evidence that must be true for an argument's conclusion to be valid. It's essential to remember that, in assumption questions, you must assume the author's conclusion is 100% true, regardless of how absurd it may seem. To emphasize this point, consider an extreme example. If the author concludes that aliens will arrive next week, you must accept this as a fact. For instance, one assumption might be that the unusual lights in the sky are indeed a spaceship commanded by aliens. Although the GMAT rarely presents such extravagant arguments, this extreme example underscores the importance of accepting the author's conclusion without hesitation. Assumption questions hold a pivotal role among critical reasoning concepts and question types. They are crucial because assumptions underlie 5 distinct question types: find the assumption questions, evaluate the argument questions, strengthen questions, weaken questions, and flaw questions. In the upcoming segments, we will explore the connection between assumptions and each of these question types. However, let's begin by thoroughly examining the concept of assumption itself. First, focus on identifying what else must be true for the author's conclusion to be valid, and that's your assumption. In the next section, let's explore an example to illustrate this concept. Let's examine a new example. In recent years, most people in Techville have switched to electric vehicles, EVs, for their daily commutes due to rising fuel costs. Given the increasing number of EV charging stations and government incentives, it can be concluded that the trend towards EV adoption will continue to grow. Which of the following is an assumption on which the argument depends? A. Electric vehicles have a lower environmental impact than traditional cars. B. Fuel prices will remain stable. C. The availability of EV charging stations will increase. D. Government incentives for EVs will continue. E. People in Techville value environmental sustainability. Now, let's analyze this argument. The conclusion is that the trend towards EV adoption will continue to grow. The evidence includes the fact that more people are switching to EVs due to rising fuel costs and the presence of charging stations and government incentives. Therefore, the author must assume that governments are indeed dedicated to supporting EV adoption. Option D reflects this assumption and is the correct answer. Remember to like and share this video with someone who is preparing for the GMAT exam. Subscribe to this channel for more lessons on GMAT preparation and MBA application. In critical reasoning, we encounter active and passive assumptions. Active assumptions support the argument and must be true for the argument to be valid. Passive assumptions are what the author doesn't state but indirectly assumes. Now, let's differentiate between active and passive assumptions. Active assumptions actively support the argument and must be true for the argument to be valid. However, when you assume something to be true in an argument, you implicitly assume that alternative possibilities are not true. These unspoken, negated possibilities are known as passive assumptions. For instance, in the EV adoption argument, the active assumption is that governments are committed to promoting EV adoption and will invest in charging infrastructure. Passive assumptions include: governments are not prioritizing other initiatives over EV adoption. There are no significant obstacles preventing governments from investing in EV charging infrastructure, and EV adoption is indeed a priority for governments. These passive assumptions negate alternative possibilities that could undermine the active assumption. Notice that passive assumptions contain negating words, often using not. In conclusion, active assumptions support the argument and must be true for the argument to be valid. Passive assumptions negate alternative possibilities and can be numerous. While you won't be explicitly asked to differentiate between them on the GMAT, understanding their existence can be beneficial. Let's explore one more example. Regular exercise and a balanced diet are essential for maintaining good health. Susan is in excellent health, therefore, it can be inferred that she maintains a regular exercise routine. The conclusion is that Susan maintains a regular exercise routine. The evidence is that regular exercise and a balanced diet are crucial for good health, and Susan is in excellent health. The assumption here is that Susan's excellent health is primarily a result of her regular exercise routine. If this assumption is not valid, the argument falls apart. Perhaps Susan maintains excellent health due to her diet, genetics, or other factors unrelated to exercise. Therefore, the author must assume that regular exercise is the primary reason for her excellent health. This brings us to the end of this discussion on active and passive assumptions for critical reasoning questions on the GMAT exam. Next, let's look at some steps to follow to solve these questions. Consider this example. Techville's new public transportation system has greatly reduced traffic congestion. The author attributes this reduction solely to the new buses being introduced. Passive assumptions in this case could include: the quality of roads hasn't significantly improved. Traffic lights and regulations haven't changed. There hasn't been a decrease in the number of vehicles on the road for other reasons. Passive assumptions are crucial because denying any of them could undermine the original argument. Unlike active assumptions, we can have multiple passive assumptions, all with negating words like not. Summarizing some tips to attempt the assumption question on critical reasoning on the GMAT exam. Step 1. Understand the argument. Begin by carefully reading the argument and ensure you fully grasp the evidence presented and the conclusion drawn by the author. Step 2. Recognize the missing link. Acknowledge that in assumption questions, there is typically a crucial piece of information missing from the argument. This missing element is the key to making the author's conclusion valid. Step 3. Predict the missing assumption. Attempt to anticipate what this missing piece of evidence might be. In Find the Assumption questions, strive to formulate a potential answer in your mind before examining the given options. Eliminate incorrect options. Review the provided answer choices and begin eliminating those that are evidently incorrect. Don't choose an option which merely restate what is already presented in the argument, as assumptions add something new. By following these steps, you'll be better equipped to tackle assumption questions on the GMAT with a systematic and strategic approach. Remember to practice these techniques to enhance your critical reasoning skills. So, assumption questions are fundamental in GMAT critical reasoning, as they underpin various question types. Start by understanding the argument, attempt to predict the assumption if possible, and eliminate answer choices that are clearly incorrect. If you're torn between options, consider the negation rule. Lastly, while you won't be explicitly asked to identify passive assumptions on the GMAT, recognizing their existence can enhance your understanding of the argument's intricacies. Always remember that assumptions are implicit, unspoken elements that must be true for the argument to hold water. All the best! Remember to like and share this video with someone who is preparing for the GMAT exam. Subscribe to this channel for the next chapter shortly.